What's up, guys and gals? Welcome to another Dacetacular Mind. I'm going to start this week's episode off with apologizing for not having one last week. Life got pretty hectic as I was on the road for work, and I was at an event which is called a Go Live, where we turn an old system off and turn on the new system that I'm skilled at to a bunch of people who have never seen the system before, or at least have very minimal exposure to it. So it makes the days very long and the weeks even longer. So I did not have an opportunity that week to record for last Monday, and I apologize for that, because even when I got home, there was very minimal time because I spent most of the week at the site that I was working on, and then when I got back to the house, into my own personal life, which was very short, mind you, there was already things planned. So there wasn't a good chance to kind of like sit down, chisel out some time for a podcast, and then present it in quality for Monday. And not to mention, when you're in the middle of that kind of go live scenario, when it comes to the job that I do, you could have like 51 weeks of just chill. That week or two, or that 52nd week when you're doing this go live, is just 100% focused on resolving issues, making sure people feel comfortable in the job they're doing, and getting them through this dip in knowledge transfer. Because again, it's a new system. You're rocking people's world. It's a very tough cookie to tackle, and one of the most challenging things I've done in my career. This was probably like my 12th or 13th one, but again, I want to apologize because of that and the focus that I was doing on that. I was unable to drop an episode last Monday. And one day, says the man who's worked for the company for 18 years, if I don't work for this company, I will gladly share stories of what these experiences are like, but until then, I'm not going to bite the hand that feeds. The day I don't work here, I will rip that bitch off, but I like money. I'm not gonna put that in peril to do a podcast, so just want to throw that out there. So last time we talked, or you listened to me talk, and I talked to a screen, it was kind of a heavy topic, and I appreciate for those that did reach out. It meant a lot. I do truly appreciate it. And it was really just, I like to put these things into podcast form so people can learn from my experiences. And I can go back and remember things I said a year down the road, or like go back and just listen to myself talk about these topics, because every once in a while you need a refresher course of where you've been, where you've come, and if you stray off the course, how to get back to where you were doing the best and the best version of you. So I want to appreciate, I do appreciate everybody who reached out, talked to me, and again, it was a heavy episode for me. This week, it could get heavy again, but it's just, I don't know what part of my life I haven't had a chance to do some research, because as I was doing the other episodes where I was doing the Dace Man Show Year 1, or the Origins, the OTW first run, and things like that, I did a little bit of research to remember some people, like who I was around that time, what I was doing, and some of the events to get like some of the facts right. And I still probably skewed them, only because I do have a shoddy memory. Remember, that's part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast, is to get my memories into audio form, so when I'm a dementia patient at age 35, I have audio history of me. So this week, I want to talk about, again, it's going to be something a little bit heavier. I don't get to stick to my format of heavy, light, because I didn't do research on some of the light stuff, being in this go live scenario for the past 2 weeks. But I want to talk about anxiety. And the reason I say this is because I had a couple moments in the past, we'll say 3 weeks, where I would say the anxiety flared up. And to me, anxiety wasn't a thing that I experienced as a person until January 2020. Now, for all you Loki fans out there, we're going to call this my nexus event. So prior to 2020, it's hard for me to remember a time where something overwhelmed me to the point ambiguous or specific, that I couldn't function. The mentality I had had up until January of 2020 is just plow through, keep moving, and as long as you keep moving, you can't be taken out. And in 2020, topped up with the pandemic, I had experienced a very emotionally, and I would say it's a personality crisis that happened, and a development of anxiety, more or less, or at least an acknowledgement that I can experience anxiety. And it's weird because up until that point, I don't ever think it had disabled me from day-to-day functions. And then we'll refer to as the Nexus event. Keep hat tipping to Loki and Marvel. I experience it way more than not, especially at first. I'm a lot better now, a year and a half later, than I was at the Nexus event. The Nexus event, it was every day. Just smells, memories, situations, movies, music, just anything could take me from having a clear train of thought to an automatic stop, like a freight train just smashing into a wall. And it was hard to deal with. Like, part of the reason I started doing this podcast, and part of the reason this thing came to be what it is simply because I was told by a therapist I was using, since it's easier for me to talk in a podcast format or just talk to a screen and get my emotions out that way, to do it and then listen back to it. Those tapes are awful. I'm a sobbing mess. I'm incoherent. All over the board. I haven't had a chance to actually... You wouldn't know what I was talking about because I was bouncing. And part of that is the anxiety. There was just so much changing that I couldn't hold on. Now, I enjoyed chaos. I'm not even going to lie. If you listen to the political affiliations one that I did for Dacetacular Mind, you know that I enjoy chaos. I like shaking the system. But as a person, there's not too much chaos. Like, I never realized how organized or plan-oriented of a person I was until my Nexus event in January 2020. I smile and giggle every time I say Nexus event because it's Loki. Like, there's different variants of me right now that wouldn't be doing this podcast and would still be sticking to the same course. But this current main timeline, it's just unfathomable, if I said that word right, that my brain, and I know my brain's been a weapon against myself on certain occasions, but it was winning the battle of functioning versus just curl up in a ball and don't move. But the weirdest sensation is just the pit drop and sense of nervousness and the sense of loss of control. And you don't realize how much control you think you have until you experience that big event, aka the Nexus event. And when I experienced that, it shifted so many things for me. I viewed the world through different lenses. Because here I was, we'll just say 2019 and prior, and we covered this in the first episode. I was looking at it from one perspective, and essentially from an arrogant perspective. And it's kind of arrogant to talk back on this, that, oh, you didn't experience anxiety? It's not that I didn't experience it. It didn't cripple me, or it didn't slow me down as much as it did starting last year, and still does today. I would say it still slows me down more today than it did prior to last year. And it's just a weird thing, because like the perspective I had on people and the world and how things are done, and a jaded sense too, because there's a lot of anger there. didn't really allow for anxiety. Didn't like it, again. It's hard to sit here and say that I never experienced it then, but I experienced it a hell of a lot less. To come into January 2020 and onward, that it stopped me in my tracks, and it is infuriating. So being in, and this is where we're going to dig into the Dace mind. Being inside that head of mine, you know what's causing it. So I know a lot of people get this anxiety where it's a pit drop and you don't know why. It's hard to put into words what it is that's causing it, or you just don't want to face what's causing it. I knew what was causing mine. Like point blank. I feel like most people know what was causing mine. And it would stop me. And I would, the outward appearance was sadness, but the inside was just, to me, it was pure rage. Like, how are you letting this stop you from being you? And then having no control of fixing it. So I'm literally going through, this isn't you. You just get by this. It's fine. You're gonna bounce back. You know it's gonna, time heals. And then just like the other half of my brain going, nah, dog, you're out of commission for a while. Slow down. And to be a highly motivated person, like I like to think that I am, that like if I set my mind to something, I'll get it done. And to have your brain tell you, nah, that's not the game plan for right now. We know you've been doing that for 32 years. Slow your ass down. It's time to A, recharge, and B, just like grieve a bit. And it was a weird experience. And that feeling happened it happened so much at first. And it's hard to explain because like anxiety is not something people can explain very easily because you don't know. It's just this weird gut feeling you have. And you don't know how to explain it. Cuz again, I knew what was causing most of mine. Most people know what causes theirs. A lot of people have a hard time facing it. But at the end of the day, it just stops you. I mean, the definition of anxiety is an intense, excessive, and persistent worry and fear about everyday situations. Fast heart rate, rapid breathing, sweating, and feeling tired may occur. That was like January to May of 2020 for me. And it wasn't an everyday situation. So, like, mine wasn't an everyday situation that triggered it. It was the Nexus event. But remembering everyday situations that I used to have. And it still happens. I'm not saying I'm out of the woods. I'm not saying I'm 100%. I'm not saying that I've beat it and I'm who I am again. I think the key thing is I'm acknowledging it. Whereas before, I was arrogant, bullheaded, super stubborn, and just wouldn't. And I'm sure people have observed me prior to the Nexus event. I'm gonna get that over, man. Because Marvel can't. But I'm sure people have seen it and probably had noticed the way I acted with certain things prior to 2020. And would have been easily able to identify, like, oh, he's having an anxiety attack, or like, he's going through some. I call it going through some shit, but the medical term is probably anxiety. Like, and in hindsight, you look back at some of that stuff. Like, I have an issue going to people's houses. It's weird, right? Like, I have often been told that I am the greatest people person who doesn't like people. Ever. I don't know what the technical term for that. People have tried to tell me what I am through the definitions. I don't get it. How I describe it, people, person who doesn't like people. So one of the things that I now realize it's anxiety, is going to someone's house. It's not mine. There's a lot more confidence and bravado and ability to just be me in my own house than if I go somewhere else. Something I do all the time when I go to parties or I go to events that are hosted by friends or family. I don't eat. I won't eat at an event, and it's the weirdest thing, and I don't know why I do it. I guess I get in my own head that I don't want people to see me as I'm eating food that they have provided, and they provided it because they wanted people to eat it, but for whatever reason, I don't eat it. I just considered myself to be a stubborn asshole. Like, I don't need them. I don't need your food, man. Come on. I can get my own food. And I would. I'd go to like a fast food place or like Wawa on the way home because I wouldn't eat at a party where people made all that food for their guests and my dumbass just wouldn't eat it. And I now know that's just, it's probably related to anxiety, for the fear that people were going to judge the way I eat. I don't know why. You eat in front of hundreds of people in high school. You eat in front of people at restaurants. I go to a house party, I don't eat. I go to a house, I'm completely uncomfortable because it's not mine. And I know that I'm like a world traveler. I've been to so many cities and countries and stuff like that, and yet invite me over to your house as one of my friends, and I feel super uncomfortable because it's not mine. And I feel like that could be chalked up to anxiety. Like, in my brain, the worst case scenario is happening. Oh, they handed me a drink. Oh my god, I dropped the glass and it broke. It's never gonna happen. It probably happens 1 in a million times. Like, literally, I have to throw the damn glass. But in my head, it's like, nah, I'd rather just people come here. I can roll with the punches better here. I can be me better here. And I just would chalk it up as laziness. Now, I'm more open to it. Because I've addressed it. To the point where, like, doing these podcasts and stuff, like, one thing that I will admit, as a boyfriend, I was terrible. I only have, like, one mode. It's either I'm on, like, going 5 miles per hour or I'm going 65. So for something I didn't do in a previous relationship, I overcompensate in the next relationship and vice versa. And in this instance, it's going to be going to the girlfriend's house, whereas, so, like, quick anecdote, a girl that I dated in 2014, 15, probably more 15 than it was 14, she never came over to my house. I was always at her house, and I butted heads with her mom, and it was mainly because I was out of my comfort zone, and B, we never came to my house. I have a lot of cool toys here. I have a lot of cool movies here. I have everything I need here. Wawa is visible through my bedroom window. I would have to go there all the time. So when we split, the next girlfriend I had, which was for 3 years, always came over. And I refused to go to her house because everything I wanted and had and needed was here. And that's not fair to her, because there's going to be days for her she just wants to lay in bed, and maybe she doesn't want to come here, and maybe she doesn't want to be the stranger in someone else's house. Not that she was a stranger, but out of her element, and I could have just went there and watched the same thing we were watching at my place at her place. And for whatever reason, again, I'm a 5 miles per hour guy or a 65 miles per hour guy. I slammed down on that gas and said, no, we are here. And I stuck to my guns. And now, with who I'm with now, it's a balance, because I've acknowledged that. I've looked at the fact that, hey, you're a little weird when it comes to this stuff. Maybe weird's not the right word, but that's the pep talk I gave myself. It's like, hey, nothing's gonna happen. If you do the fair balance, if you go there a couple times, they come here a couple times, it works out better. Ultimately, I just asked her to move in to eliminate that conversation because that was easier. But at the same time, it's not fair to who I dated for 3 years. And it wasn't fair to me for the girl that I dated before her to always have to go there. And I never learned from that. I just flipped it and forced the person I dated for 3 years to come see me every night, whenever they could. And it was all chalked up to just this weird, anxious feeling that like I'm not in my element, and I don't have. I think it comes down to more of a control thing. That I know my house. I know where everything is. I know how to work everything. I know what is in the fridge. I know what's in the cabinet. I know where the bathrooms are. I know. I go over there, it's a different element. You're out of your element, and I would just work myself up to the point where like I often just didn't go to things, which robs me of an experience, pisses off the person I'm dating, pisses off my friends because now we always go to his house, but he never comes the fuck over here, and I get that, and I'm sorry. I'm just it truly was something that would weigh on my head, and often I would just cast it as like, I don't feel like fucking driving over there, which is rude because they drive over here. But it was more so like, I gotta go there. What if there are people there that I don't know that now I have to interact with? And then you do that weird fake interaction you do with people you don't really know well, where you pretend to care what they're saying and it comes off fake, and you know you're being fake, and then you're worrying that maybe they know you're being fake. And that's what would run through my head. And back then I would chalk it up as, you know what, I just don't fucking want to go. I'm not going to do something I don't want to do. Whereas now I look at it and go, hey, breathe. You can handle this. You know you're good with people. You know when you're faking and hamming it up versus when you're more relaxed. Just chill. So it's kind of like the pep talk I give myself now before I do things. I still avoid situations that I don't want to get in. I'm not perfect. There's still that anxious level that before I deal with people that I know is going to either be confrontational or there's a weird hanging issue, even if it's irrelevant. Like there's several times where there's things I don't care about, and then people bring it up, and then all of a sudden I care about it, and then walk away going like, you didn't care about that. Why did you say anything? Again, living in your head in this weird anxious state. But there's certain situations today I'm avoiding because I plan out the worst case scenarios in my head and go, you know what? It's easier just to avoid it and not deal with it and just like move that away from my life than to confront it head on. Because if it is the worst case scenario, I know how it's going to play out, which in my head, I don't want to do. Best case scenario is it doesn't play out like that and it plays out better, and it's going to play out better because you're literally thinking of the worst possible outcome. And it's just like, why deal with that? And that comes back to anxiety. Like, these are the inner things you're thinking that all of a sudden stop you, and then you look at your watch and go, holy shit, it's been 20 minutes and you've been thinking about this thing that's not even going to happen. Or like you're just not going to do anyway. So why the hell are you thinking about this shit? And I have experienced that way more since the Nexus event in January 2020. But the key one that really bothers me that's been happening since then is the person who was involved with that event and the thought of her, or, you know, just, I won't even say just her, because it would be certain scenarios. There's things that have happened to me 15 years ago. So I'm not even going to just pinpoint her and that stuff. That one's happens more so than most, but just dumb shit like, oh, this is what you did in first grade, and remember when like you sneezed in your hands and you made a mess, and like the teacher was completely disgusted at the fact that you sneezed in your hand and the class was watching you. It's like, what? I don't remember shit. I barely remember people I met 2 weeks ago and their name, but you remember this? And it stops me. Like, it'll just shut me down of like, oh my God, I feel like shit. I wonder if that teacher is like still mad at me. Or more importantly, is that teacher still alive? I'm old. That means she's even older. She was old when I had her. Like that type of stuff. And it happens more now than it did before. And I don't know if it was because like I didn't get these anxiety attacks. I don't know if it was because I was arrogant and just like, you know what, who the fuck cares? But I don't respond that way now, and it's weird because in the back of my mind I'm thinking, who cares? Like, why are you dwelling on this? But there's a part of my brain like, you need to start acknowledging this. You need to start rectifying some of this. You need to address this, or you need to figure out why it keeps popping back up. And I think in a nutshell, I have moderate anxiety now. I wouldn't say I have extreme. I had extreme anxiety. I've been able to work through most of it. But now it's I go longer stretches without having issues, as opposed to having one like every other day. I have moments, and I'm going to use that ignorant term of powering through, where it's like, oh shit, no, you're fine, this is where your life's heading now. Don't even think about that. It doesn't not hurt, doesn't not stop you for at least that brief moment, and it lingers. You know, especially when you're just like, the good thing for me is work has picked back up. I've gotten back into my projects. I'm doing these podcasts. I'm doing a lot of things to keep my mind off of it. But for that brief moment, I'm not doing something. I'm not playing with, I guess what will be eventually my stepson, or working or podcasting or playing softball, going out. Like, life's returning to normal. The pandemic clearly did not help any of this, and maybe that's why I exposed it pretty hard. But that brief moment that's there, when it happens, it will linger for an hour or so. Right now, as I do this podcast, I have these thoughts in my heads. I only have one head. I guess two, if you want to get perverted. But I have thoughts in my head of like, what if? Will I resolve things? There's a lot of issues I would like to talk about at some point on here, that bother me with other people, without naming the other people. But there's situations that I wish had not occurred. I wish I could resolve. I know there's some that I can't resolve. I know that if I try to resolve some of them, it's going to cause other issues. It's just it's a cluster in my head. But one thing I think I took solace in at least May of last year with this anxiety and tackling it, I focused on one person. I focused on that person. I devoted myself to that person. And I just kind of sat down and said, Chris, what the hell do you want? And I think that eased most of my anxiety. I still don't know what I want 100%. Don't get me wrong. I constantly question decisions I've made over and over again. But when I pulled back off the gas, cruised at 25 instead of doing 5 or 65, and just went, what makes you happy? What do you want? And at the end of the day, having someone who wants me as much as I want them, and having that family, balanced it. And the more I do that, the less anxiety I have, or at least severe anxiety. So I have the ability to handle the smaller things that can trip me up from time to time, and not have the bigger things leave a hole in me that just knocks me out for the rest of the day. Trust me, when it happens at like 8 or 9 a.m., the rest of the day sucked. Now, when it happens at 8 or 9, it's just, I can look over and see them. I can see a future. I can see a plan. And that anxiety is kind of softened a bit. Now, I'm not going to sit here and just pretend like I'm an expert on anxiety. Again, I'm telling you all that I just first started acknowledging it a year ago. And to be honest, I don't even know if I still truly have it. Like, I know there are people who get that pit feeling that can't understand why they have that pit feeling. And they can't resolve it. And I just got lucky that I just kind of looked in the mirror, or in this instance, talking to a microphone to a recorder and said, "The hell do you want?" Point blank. And once I did that, and once I had that conversation, literally with myself, I started getting back to who I was, but a better version. Acknowledging anxiety is something that happens to everyone, including myself. And just, taking it rather than the bullish man bravado of, I'm fine, I don't need any help, I'm good, what are you talking about? It was more so, no, you're not good. You feel this way for a reason. Why do you feel this way? Are you able to identify what's causing it? If so, how do we fix it? And then approach it from a logical position. Now, again, I know that's not easy for everyone to do. I know there are people who have this kind of issue that strictly it's ambiguous. Like, so it's really hard for them to pinpoint what caused it. And it could be because you just got, like, this world throws so much crap at people all the time. That when I talked about the Nexus event in January 2020, beginning of February, I lost my grandmother. Beginning of March, I lost my grandfather. And then mid-March, we were locked down. So that was like a 4 gut punch thing that happened to me. And I can't sit here and even say that, like, God, 2020 was the worst year ever for me. It was the worst year for everybody. It makes it even harder for you to find people to talk to because everybody's experiencing it. People are social beings, and social distancing was enacted. So everybody understood what anxiety was in that moment. Some people didn't get it until that first lockdown. I attribute mine starting in January, and some people have dealt with it their entire life. But now that I know what it is, now that I can address it, and now that I can understand that sometimes you got to just let it happen, it allows me to approach it better. And I think instead of having, again, what I called the Nexus event in January 2020, there shouldn't be this dam breaking and letting everything out from 30 years. It's now in smaller chunks and more manageable and easier for me to be like, you know what? These are the 3 things that are happening to me right now. It could be one of these 3. Let's kind of think through it and see if we can pinpoint what actually caused that stomach drop. And there's a big one still in my life that I need to fully quell. That's not a word. Fully understand, hopefully extinguish, but realistically, I don't think I can. I don't think I ever will. I think it could potentially cause other problems as I try to resolve it. Is what it is. You take the punches as you roll with the punches and just deal with it as it comes at you. But at the same time, to know what it is and to be able to say, hey, this is the thing that can, yeah, it's a stopgap. It's a potential red flag that is going to ultimately hinder your progress elsewhere. Wow, I'm sorry, I have the hiccups. Will hinder your progress elsewhere. It's good to at least know it's on the radar. That dam might get some cracks in it and leak a bit because of it, but hopefully the dam holds and we get through it. The other stuff, it's a lot easier to handle with. Like, I can tell you, for example, this whole, I kicked off the show by telling you I didn't do a show last week because of this Go Live. There was anxiety there because when you do something like a Go Live, where you're taking someone from an older system they have worked with for X amount of years and you're putting them on a brand new system, so as similar as that system could be, It is new keystrokes, it's new screens, it's new terminology, it's new everything. And you are the liaison between that old system to the new system. And unfortunately, with this old system, I was not familiar with it. So there was a level of anxiety that as you're bringing this new system to them, you have to assure them that, like, hey, it's going to be tough, but we can get through this. Weighs on you every single day leading up to it. And then there was also an incident where I couldn't be there the first day they flipped the switch. So I spent actually at that point, 6 weeks prepping people just not to be there the first day. And the wave of anxiety that was like extinguished on that Monday when I did arrive is that I did a decent enough job. They got through the first day with minimal issue. And then as we walked away after 2 weeks, it's probably one of the best ones we've done. I didn't have that end picture yet. So the weeks leading up to that flip of the switch was rough. And I was losing a bit of sleep. I was worried. I thought the world was going to come crashing down. And it didn't. But I was able to handle it. I kept my stuff together, so they say. And kept up that front of like, hey, it's going to be okay. We're going to be here to help you. We're going to get through this. And we did. They didn't know that as I was keeping that calm demeanor in my head, I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. It's going to crash and burn. I don't even know what they do now. Like, it was a lot of panic and a lot of what if scenarios, because it was also, even though I have done many of these go lives in the past, it's a new group of people who were doing it. I did almost the largest chunk of the go lives I have done. I did with one iteration of this company, and now we were technically a new one 4 years removed from, well, at this point we were 7 years removed from the last go live I had done, but it was 4 years removed from the company that used to do them with us. So when through all the acquisitions, mergers, sales, and all that stuff that's ever happened with the company I'm at, it was a new group of behind the scenes people. So there was just a lot of anxiety there too of, I don't know. I know they do good quality work for helping and fixing the issues that come up in everyday processes, but I don't know what I don't know. And what I didn't know is, like, we've all have never done a go live together, and it turned, anxiety be damned, it turned out fine. So I know I'm going to deal with this going forward. I feel like I am in a better position because I'm acknowledging it. I understand it. I look it in the eye and I go, hey, I'm going to get through this, with the exception of the one big thing that I'm still working on. I'm a lot better with that one big thing now than I was back then when it first happened. But it still does peek its ugly head. Not her per se, but the ideas. I spoke to it before. The fact that I had hit the gas on, you have to come here all the time. There's a lot of memories in the house that I currently live in. So there's a lot of triggers in the house that can trigger that anxiety of just be like, oh, wow, this was her thing. Or, oh, wow, that's the song that reminds me of her. Oh, wow, I remember doing this with her. And it's a lot of things. And it used to stop me. And it took me an hour or two to get out of it. Now it's kind of like, breathe. All right, we're good. So I just wanted to talk about anxiety. I hope this one wasn't as heavy as the children one I did. And I'll get back into some lighter stuff, hopefully, in the next coming weeks. I'm not traveling up to the place I was at anymore, so I'll have more time to plan out what I want to talk about. Maybe we'll do 2 back-to-back of just easy stuff. I want to talk about stuff like the origin of why I hate Lena Dunham so much. She will be the first person I put on this podcast and put on blast, because I just feel like it needs to be known. We had t-shirts that said, shut up, Lena Dunham, and maybe people are curious as to where that came from, and there's going to be new things on the Days Man show about Lena Dunham, so, like, maybe we'll go into that. I had somebody reach out to me who wants to do the uncensored comedy podcast with me, so maybe we can actually start bringing in guests in the Dacetacular Mind to talk about these scenarios, and maybe talk through some issues, too, of just, shooting the shit. One of the favorite things I like about podcasts and traveling up to New York for this project has been able to listen to people talk with their friends, and like I watched the Fake Doctors Real Friends, which is the Scrubs podcast, or listen to, and even though they talk about the show, there's a good chunk of them just talking about their life and talking about issues and just like how they respond to things, and I like that, and I think that's a good conversation to have on this type of podcast. Whereas the Daceman show is just kind of like a news variety show type thing. So this will be a good idea to chase down. So guests may be coming soon. But thank you for sticking with me. I'm sorry for the inconsistency over the past month. I know it was a week on, week off, week on, week off. We'll be back to weekly episodes every Monday, dropping at noon, wherever you get podcasts. So thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I hope I remember something. And you just got a glimpse into a Dacetacular Mind. Yes, I have an outro for this. Didn't get one for Pod Nerd, but I have one for this. And we'll see you guys next week.